pleasures. Thank you so much for all your participation today. Now, continuing with the topic of marriage, we're going to move on to our Thursday second hour segment, 마음톡톡. So, especially for all you married folk, this might be a very helpful segment today. Tune in. 네, time for IOB's Mind Talk, 마음톡톡 with our in-house therapist, Miss 오정아. 원장님 안녕하십니까?
안녕하세요, 여러분. 오정아입니다. From Chicago Therapeutic Center, Chicago 심신치유센터.
네, 원장님 반갑습니다.
반갑습니다.
So, 원장님, you heard me talking about the text topic that we have going on in today's show. I think that's very much related to what we're going to talk about today,
I think so.
right? So, what do you have for our listeners?
Yeah, a couple who have been married for a decade, they've probably shared countless moments of joy, supported each other through challenges, and built a life together. However, sometimes there are signs that the marriage is showing cracks. So today, here's today's story.
We've been married for 10 years, and recently it feels like we're drifting apart. The main problem is communication. We used to talk about everything, but now we barely have meaningful conversations. We argue over trivial things, and it's affecting our relationship and our children. Our once loving home now feels tense and distant. What can we do to reconnect and rebuild the trust and intimacy we once had? Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Now, this is something that really... Okay, I'm not saying I'm going through the same thing, but that first sentence, 10 years into the marriage, right? I am on my 9th, moving on to my 10th.
Wow, okay.
And for me, I can honestly say things are still going good. But like, what if there are worries? I'm sure all couples, right, have worries like this. So yeah, let's get into the story and to today's topic, 원장님.
Sure. Let's refer to this writer as Kelly. It's clear that you're deeply concerned about the state of your marriage. That shows how much you value your relationship and your commitment to making it work. So your willingness to address this issue is the first step forward, healing and strengthening your relationship.
I agree.
So Miss Sue, what's your first impression of Kelly's situation?
Well, I mean, I do want to hear the whole story of Kelly.
Yeah.
Things like work, right, between the two.
Right.
I guess more detail of how their relationship was in the beginning.
Right.
Maybe what changes that they had in their life up to this point that Kelly
Right.
thinks that maybe might have been the cause or led to these changes. But 10 years into anything, not just marriages, but other relationships, even jobs, I feel like that's like around the time where maybe if things repeat too much, 너무 똑같은 게 반복되면, people, they get tired.
I see.
They get bored sometimes. And because of those feelings, it's not the same when you maybe first started or maybe when it was at its peak, right? So, yeah. So once again, not something that I'm going through personally, but I do
Worry.
understand, and maybe the worry has crossed my mind.
Right.
I mean, can we maybe get to this point? And it is more of a worry for me.
Right. So recent research by Regain editorial team in this year shows that the top reason couples get divorced in the United States is because they have trouble talking to each other. So the research found that 67.5% of marriage ended because of communication problems. So whenever I have a couple sessions with my clients, I think almost 90% of them have communication issues.
Yeah, and this is a stat, a number, not going off that number that you mentioned, the fact that I shared with in the opening of our show, people think, 둘이 너무 달라서 문제가 생기고 뭐 이혼한다. That's why they divorce because they have so different personalities. But no, you could have the same different personalities, and sometimes it could work very well.
Right.
But it was because of the lack of communication or the quality of the communication that is the problem. But 90% of the couples that you see have communication issues. That's a very high percentage.
Yeah, of course. Yes, it is. So when a marriage ends because of the communication problems, it often means that it's been going on for a while. So if you and your spouse are always arguing or not talking to each other because you're scared of fighting, it's important to notice this issue. So communication is like the base or foundation of the successful relationship for sure.
I agree. I agree.
So, Miss, if you don't mind me asking, I think it seems like you have good communication with your wife, but how is your communication with
Well,
her?
in terms of my wife, she's very open. She doesn't hold anything in.
Okay.
She's vocal. If something is bothering her, she'll let me know. She also thinks about me before she says stuff, right? So, like arguments, of course it happens. But me, the same. We try not to say everything exactly at that point of how we feel. Because I know that's some people might say, oh, you need to do that because, everything needs to be in the open. No, but also really trying to cool down, especially if you're angry or frustrated, cool down, think it through, and then come to communicate, with your significant other. That's very important to us.
I
So
see. That's a good strategy.
yeah, we do put in the effort. 소통하는 것을 중요하다고 생각해요.
네.
저희는.
Very, very important.
Yeah.
So here are some questions for Kelly to consider to help her better understand her emotions on a deeper level and the challenges in her situation.
Okay, so maybe for me also, and for our listeners, maybe you can follow along and ask these questions to yourself, or maybe even, ask. I don't know. Would it be wise to ask these questions to your significant other as well?
This is you can reflect. This is self-reflection
Okay.
questions, so you can think about it yourself.
I see. All right, this is more towards yourself.
Right.
What are those questions?
So one, when was the last time my spouse and I had a truly meaningful conversation? Two, what are some of the triggers that lead to arguments between us? Three, have I been actively listening to my spouse? Four, have I been more focused on getting my own point across during the conversation? Five, have I been participating empathy and understanding towards my spouse, perspective and feelings? So self-reflection basically, you can essential step in understanding your emotions, identifying your needs, and developing a plan to address this situation.
Yeah. These questions, and I also like the fact that your feelings and emotions are also important.
Right.
You need to reflect upon those too. Because people think, when it comes to arguments and, lack of communication, bad communication quality between significant others, a lot of people might place too much blame on themselves. I feel like, maybe it's because I could sacrifice this about myself and just kind of, make sure fights don't happen, arguments don't happen. 그렇게 하면 communication이 좋은 편이다. But that's not it. Actually, really thinking about yourself, how you feel in the relationship is also important, along with how your husband or wife feels, right? So, yeah, I guess food for thought for Kelly in this situation, as well as for our listeners. 그럼 원장님, are there maybe specific communication methods or practices that Kelly, as well as other couples, can try?
So imago communication would be helpful to practice.
이마고.
Yeah.
imago. This is my first time hearing about that. What is imago communication?
It's a specific approach to communication within the context of the romantic relationships. 근데 이거는 romantic relationship 꼭 아니더라도
네.
그냥 가까운 사람과 대화할 때 아이들과도 좋고요. 아니면은 이제 뭐 부모님과 뭐 이제 자신 뭐 괜찮고.
So people you're very close with.
Yeah. So the therapeutic approach was developed by Harville Landrix and Helen Locally Hunt. It's designed to help couples improve their connection, enhance emotional intimacy, and create a more loving and supportive partnership.
Oh, we could all use more of that. Once again, not only with significant other couples, your husband or wife, but as 원장님 said, you could do this with your kids, with your parents, even, right? To people that are very close to you, consider them, to have like intimate relations with these people. So tell us more about the imago communication method.
So there are 4 steps in principle. The first step is called conscious dialogue. 의식적인 대화를 얘기를 하는 거고요.
네.
Both people can share their thoughts and feelings without any interruptions. It's really important.
Okay.
It's like having a special conversation rule that says, I will listen while you talk, and then you listen while I talk. So it helps make sure that both people feel heard and understood, which is really important in any relationship.
Yeah. So I'm sure a lot of our listeners, maybe 원장님, you've seen this as well. There's a number of programs, TV programs right now that focus on married couples and the problems and concerns that they have. They come on the show, and then you know how they have like cameras within their house to show the interactions between husband and wife. Whenever I see arguments that happen, but they never give the other person the opportunity to talk. It's always me. Or it's always because of you. Always getting their point across. They're always trying to, best the other person. And just by looking at that, for sure that's like, I don't think that's like a good or healthy way to go about communicating. So through the imago communication method, step number 1 is giving each other the time to say what they want. Not interrupting.
Right. So in the actual couples therapy, I'm giving them the rule that when one person is talking, you need to ask this person to get a permission to speak. So because they're just suddenly like interrupting the other person's speaking, and so that's how I asked them to do that. So that's how the one person can fully express, their thoughts and feelings.
맞아요. And not just with your significant other. I think it's just rude to interrupt people while they talk.
That's true.
네. All right. What's the second step?
The second step is called mirroring. 반영하기입니다. One person talks while the other listeners really carefully. When the speaker is done talking, the listener repeats back what they heard, like a little summary. It's important that you repeat back what the other person says, but you should not add your own thoughts or say if it's right or wrong. So the point of mirroring is a way to make sure both of you are in the same conversation.
So you're understanding what that person is saying.
Right.
Right? Yeah, because I'm sure with listeners, if you have tried to teach your children or you yourself being in school, you remember teachers always have students repeat what they say so that they can know and understand and even memorize sometimes, right? So that's something that could work for couples. 저는 이거 자주 하거든요.
네.
근데 not for conversations. 와이프가 가끔씩 뭐를 시킬 때 이렇게 여러 개 시키거나 아니면 여러 스텝을 주잖아요. 그래서 저는 항상 okay, so you said this, and this. 왜냐면 틀리면 틀리면 네, 혼날 수도 있잖아요, right?
네.
So I do a little bit of this mirroring, but it's also important to do that when it comes to conversation with each other,
네.
right?
근데 진짜 the couples therapy를 하다 보면
네.
두 분이 이게 반영하기가 진짜 잘 안 돼요. 이게 한 사람 얘기하신 거를 들어서 이제 반영을 해보세요, 리피트 해보세요 하면 들은 것 같은데 말을 못 하시는 거예요. 그러니까 그만큼 이제 연습이 안 됐다는
Yeah,
얘기겠죠.
so this is mirroring is a practice that's that might be quite awkward for a lot of couples because they don't do this. I mean, even in like, if you were in a regular conversation, if you have somebody always repeat what you're saying, 제가 듣기로 like 나를 놀리는 건가? Like the conversation is going so slow. But when it comes to couples and especially during like therapy sessions like you have, you do this to make sure that they understand what that person is saying. And I think that's so important. 아주 중요한 것 같습니다. So that's called mirroring. Step number 2. What about the third step?
The third step is called validation, 인정하기. It's a way to say, I totally get how you're feeling, even if I don't feel exactly the same way. By validating your spouse's feelings, you can create a connection and show that you care about what your spouse is going through. So it's a way to understand each other better, especially when your spouse has difficult thoughts or feelings about something.
Oh, so this is the understanding step. Step number 2, mirroring, is just you kind of repeating, making sure you know what the person is saying.
네네.
And then step 3 is 그거를 이해하는 거잖아요. Right?
근데 이해하는 건데 이게 인정하기가 조금 헷갈리시는 분인데 공감이랑 인정을 조금 헷갈리시는 분들이 있거든요.
Okay.
그래서 인정하기는 어떤 거냐면 나는 그러지 않겠지만 너의 입장에서는 그렇게 할 수 있었겠다.
Okay.
I wouldn't do that, but
Yeah.
if I were you, I would be done.
Yeah.
So
you are taking yourself out of the picture because if you're trying to understand that person and recognize it as an actual feeling or experience that they're going through, you can't put yourself in there. 왜냐면 you're you and they're them.
right.
You know what I mean? So you take yourself out of that picture and you recognize that person and their feelings as an actual feeling and experience. 네. So your standards shouldn't be included in what they're saying.
네, that's important.
그렇게 하니까 이해됩니다.
네네.
And the fourth step.
The fourth step is called empathetic response, 공감적 반응.
네.
So when your spouse is upset or happy about something, you can say something like, I definitely get why you feel that way. This kind of response helps make couples stronger and closer because it's like saying, I care about how you're feeling. It's all about showing that you care about each other's emotions and experiences.
Yeah, I feel like, would you say step number 4 is the most important?
Yeah, it is important, but if you cannot do first, second, and third steps, it's not going to work.
And you can't just stop at step number 1 or step number 2. 끝까지, step number 4까지 가야지. Like you see the benefits of doing this.
It's 이거 커플 테라피에서 이거 같이 연습을 하는데
네.
처음엔 굉장히 awkward. It's so awkward to do this.
'Cause I mean, what normal couple but maybe after therapy it becomes a normal part of their conversations and their daily life. But maybe before those therapy sessions, unless you don't maybe you had you took therapy classes in college or maybe 여기에 좀 관심 있으면 할 수 있을 것 같은데요. But for regular couples, going step by step, right? It's not something that you find normally, I feel like.
Yeah.
So going through these steps of the imago communication method, this is how effective, 원장님, has it been for you and the sessions that you have with the imago communication?
I think it turns out really good result that they said even if it's kind of awkward, but doing the session and also like when they are at home, they are trying to like apply this imago communication.
네.
They feel like they're more connected to each other. They feel like they feel like 이 사람이 진짜 나를 많이 이해하고 듣고 있구나라는
네.
게 그러면서 좀 마음이 많이 오픈되는 것 같은.
맞아요.
네네.
Especially if couples come into those sessions
네.
thinking like divorce is the only answer because he or she
네.
doesn't understand me, isn't listening to me. I feel like just by doing this, I guess that person maybe really did feel this way or can maybe change with this type of exercise.
네네.
So I see this being very effective. I like it. Is there anything else to maybe keep in mind for Kelly in her situation as well as other couples when they're especially practicing imago communication?
So when you are practicing imago communication with your spouse, please do not blame or criticize your spouse. Blaming can make the other person defensive, so it would be better to talk about how you feel without pointing fingers.
이게 iMessage죠?
네, 맞아요. 네. This way of talking helps couples express their feelings and needs without hurting each other's feelings.
So rather than starting the sentence with you, because of you, 너 때문에, right?
Many
내가
people have the habits of pointing
yeah.
other person. Instead.
Rather, even if you have maybe that same thought, saying it in a way of how you feel and what you're going through might help that person understand better. 왜냐면 blame하면 바로 defense가 올라오잖아요.
맞아요.
Right? And I think that's probably not the best way to start a conversation, especially with your spouse, right? Very informative segment that we had with you, 원장님. So today, covering the imago, excuse me, imago communication method. Maybe this is something that I know it's going to be awkward. Just by listening to our radio show and then practicing this at home with your husband or wife, 조금 어색할 수 있지만, I think the important message, if you could take one message, is communication is important and quality of communication is also important, right? So 그냥 듣고 stop하는 게 아니라 듣고 like communication is 주고받고 you give and take.
Right.
It's a two-way street when it comes to communication.
Yeah, it has to be.
Yeah. Dr. Yu, I keep saying Dr. O. 네, 우리 원장님, 오 원장님 너무 감사합니다. I said Dr. Yu because Dr. Yu is flooding our YouTube comments.
Oh, okay. Is there?
원장님, I also want to ask you,
Yeah.
this could be your own personal opinion, or maybe you could actually put your professional opinion in this too. Do you think couples that have the same personality or different personality, which do you think is better? I guess in your own personal opinion.
I can say which one is better. I think there is pros and cons. And so I think communication is the most important in any relationship.
Good
I
answer.
Think. Yeah.
Good answer.
So, yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah, it's hard.
It's hard to
say.
choose because, like you said, I feel like there's a lot of good, but also that comes with the bad for both styles. Same style couples and different style couples. But the key, important point is communication between the two.
Yes, it is.
원장님, thank you so much.
Thank
That will
you
do it for
for
today's 마음톡톡 inside of Busan's Mind Talk with our in-house therapist. I like saying that. In-house therapist. 우리 오정아 원장님 from Chicago Therapeutic Center. 원장님, we'll see you back here next week.
Yeah, for sure.
네,
Okay.
수고했습니다. Thank you.
네, 감사합니다.